Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Demai, Chapter 3, Halacha 4. This is part 2 of the shiur. Today we're going over what happens when you're depositing your grain with an idol worshiper to hold it. Now, one of the things in the Mishnah, it says, if he deposits grain or a box of grain with an idol worshiper, it is like the idol worshiper's produce. The sages are basically saying, when you go to get your box of grain back and you're going to collect it, you have to treat it like it was always stolen. In other words, like the idol worshiper always switched it, like the idol worshiper always stole the grain. And you have to assume that you're getting back definite tevel. That's going to be the key. You're getting back definite tevel. And that means that you're going to have to go back and you're going to have to tithe again. And you have to care about tithing again, because when you're tithing, it ends up costing you a lot of money. And then when you get back something that has been switched, you're going to have to do it again because you really have tevel and you have to do it again. So when you started out this process, before you ever went to the custodian to give him the box of grain to hold, you started out with more than a box of grain. You tithed it. Now you have a box of grain. You give it to the idol worshiper. The idol worshiper is always assumed to have switched it. This, by the way, is the ruling in Masechet Avodah Zarah. It's also basically the premise of what's going on here. And the idea is that they're always switching it. And you're getting back something that now when you have to tithe it, you're ending up with less than a box of grain. And it ends up adding up to just a lot of money. So really, one of the ways to look at this is like the Tanna Kamma are giving a kanas of a border that you really shouldn't be going beyond. In other words, they're really, really trying to discourage this. But in fact, if this is the practice of the idol worshippers in these areas, that they're going to be switching from higher quality product that you might have for a box of very, very low quality product that they may have. In other words, they dump out your product, they take another box of bad quality product and dump it into your box and give you your box back. Well, if that's going to be the tendency and the practice, then yeah, you're getting back definite tevel. One of the sub-themes that's going to be coming up here is what is the status of growing grain here in the land, and then you have your land, you have the grain, and it was in fact an idol worshiper who grew grain here. What's going to be the status of this? Can an idol worshiper own land in Eretz Yisrael? And is the produce that comes out of it going to have some sort of kedusha to where it's going to require tithes? That is the sub-theme here. And in this Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says that it's going to be Demai. In other words, when you're making a deposit of this box of grain with the idol worshiper, the Tanna Kamma says that you're getting back definite tevel. Rabbi Shimon is saying, no. You're not getting back definite tevel. You're getting back Demai. And that is filled with implication. And that's really going to be the key to try to understand what's coming up in these Gemaras. Now, it's going to turn out that with this dispute between the Tanna Kamma and Rabbi Shimon, the idea is that the Tanna Kamma is going to say that on a biblical level and on a rabbinic level, when you're dealing with this, you have to separate out tithes as tevel. And with regards to the ownership of the land, if something is growing in the land, the non-Jew is going to have it in a situation where the product still has kedusha and is still going to be subject to tithes, some tithes. Now, Rabbi Shimon is holding that it's going to be tevel, but it's only going to be tevel not on a rabbinic level, but on a derabanan level. So that is how he's coming up with Demai. In other words, he's saying with the ownership of the land, he's saying that because the non-Jew can grow the grain, and that he doesn't necessarily basically if the non-Jew is growing the land here, you're going to have to separate out tithes from this non-Jewish produce, but this is going to be a rabbinic restriction. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is basically going to be arguing that this is not a derabanan restriction. And the Vilna Gaon, talking about the end of chapter 3, Halacha 4, is going to be saying about this that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is holding that the non-Jews' acquisition of land in Eretz Yisrael affects the sanctity of the land and exempts it from tithes, but this is only doraita. Now, the Tanna Kamma is holding that it's going to be exempt from tithes biblically. And, the Tanna Kamma is going to treat it as Eretz Yisrael doraita. And they're going to treat it, Shimon Bar Yochai is going to be treating it as rabbinic law, saying that we treat the land of Eretz Yisrael and the product that comes out of it from the non-Jew is requiring tithing on a rabbinic level. And the Tanna Kamma are going to be saying that it's going to be any of the produce that's coming out of the land that's held by a non-Jew is going to require tithing on a doraita level. And that's going to explain why Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is saying back that you're getting back Demai, and the Tanna Kamma is saying back that you're getting back tevel. And so Rabbi Shimon says that this idol worshiper grew this inferior product to switching your box of grain with his box of grain, and he's saying on a derabanan level, you still have to tithe it. The Tanna Kamma are saying on a doraita level, you still have to tithe it, and you got back tevel. That's going to be the basic argument of what's coming up. And now we're going to be getting into the finer points of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's arguments with regards to this. The case goes like this, where you have a box of grain, you want to put it in storage. Certainly, there's a disincentive for giving to an idol worshiper to guard your grain, whether it's going to be by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai or the Tanna Kamma. You're going to end up tithing it. You have to end up with less than a box of grain. You have to tithe it. So it ends up being very expensive regardless. But we want to know what exactly is going to be the mechanics of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's opinion. When you're looking at the Tanna Kamma's opinion, it's very simple. You give the box of grain to the idol worshiper, and when you get back your box of grain, it's tevel. Presto, it's tevel. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's arguments here are a lot more nuanced, and we want to understand the minority opinion. And that's what today is going to cover. So the Tanna Kamma is going to really be getting into the extent in which the Tanna Kamma now is going to presume that this idol worshiping custodian is going to make the old switcheroo and exchange the depositor's produce with his own. Now, the Tanna Kamma is ruling that the produce that gets returned to the depositor has to be retithed as definite tevel, because they are always assuming that there was an exchange taking place. And the Tanna Kamma's view can be understood like this, that he actually assumes that an exchange took place, or that there could be a stringency here presuming that the exchange took place, and because it's likely, even very likely, that it took place, then what happens is you're going to get back definite tevel, and that's going to be part of the problem. So the Gemara goes like this: Rabbi Yirmiyah wonders in the presence of Rabbi Zera. This, by the way, is also going to be in Yerushalmi Avodah Zarah 2:3, and this over there in Avodah Zarah is going to be Rabbi Hanina talking to Rabbi Acha and Rabbi Mana, but over here, same conversation takes place. And it says, what is the Tanna Kamma's logic in treating the returned produce exactly like the idol worshippers' produce, even to the point where one can separate tithes from it for to exempt definite tevel in another place? In other words, we have a law in Masechet Trumos where if you have definite tevel here, and you have definite tevel all the way over in your house, and it's pretty far away. They're not even connected. They're not even in the same locale. Not even in the same town. Okay? You're allowed to tithe tevel that is going to be the same, grain that you have over here as the same grain type that you have over there in your house. You can exchange this for that. You can say, okay, I'm tithing this grain here, and a little bit extra for the grain that I have in my attic over there. You're allowed to do that. Now, if you don't have definite tevel, you're not allowed to do that. You can't go do that. But if you have definite tevel, the sages left that mechanism there. So they're saying, and again, by the way, this only works if you have the same and the same. You can't exchange pomegranates for figs in a different place. It doesn't work. But if you have pomegranates here and pomegranates there, and it's both definite tevel, no problem. So why is it that, and they're wondering, why is it that the Tanna Kamma is saying that you're getting back exactly tevel? Now, there's two sub-themes here. One is going to be, did they switch it? And the second sub-theme is going to be, always throughout the rest of the halacha, is what is the status of the produce that a non-Jew grows in Eretz Yisrael? Is that going to be subject to tithes or not? That's always the sub-theme. And again, the Tanna Kamma is ruling that you get back definite tevel. So Rabbi Zera replies and says to him basically that there's no basis for such a question. And the Tanna Kamma is holding that we are certain and without any doubt that the idol-worshipping custodian is exchanging the deposit with his tevel. So we know that an exchange is always taking place. And again, the second part of the sub-theme is going to be there. Let's say the idol worshiper grew the produce here in Eretz Yisrael, and it's going to be counting as tevel. So there's two things here. The Gemara by Rabbi Zera's reply continues, and it says that the returned produce is going to be treated like the custodian's definite tevel and definite tevel produce. And with regards to everything inherent in the non-Jew's produce. So in other words, even to the extent that one can separate tithes on behalf of it for other definite tevel, even in another location. And he continues and he says, and it was also without merit that Rabbi Hanina battled this point against Rabbi Acha. That is going to be a little bit complicated on this last statement. So we know that Rabbi Hanina raised this objection in Yerushalmi Avodah Zarah 2:3, and we have to go back and look at Masechet Avodah Zarah over there to see what's going on over there. And the Mara Fulda is going to explain it like this. He's going to say that Rabbi Hanina raises the same question as Rabbi Yirmiyah here, and is saying that, perhaps it's quite possible that the custodian did not actually exchange the produce, and, it should be that one should not be allowed to separate tithes on behalf of something else that's definite tevel. In other words, if you have a case where maybe you don't have tevel, and you do have definite tevel over there in your house, you're not allowed to separate something that's definitely not tevel over here, or maybe not tevel over here, for something that's definitely tevel over there. They're coming along and saying, no, it's not like that. Tanna Kamma is coming along and saying, you have definite tevel over here. The custodian gave you back definite tevel. And by the way, it's so much so that there's no doubt this is definite tevel, that you can even go exchange this for definite tevel that you have in another location, even back in your house, no problem. Now, if you were getting back something else that wasn't exactly tevel, you wouldn't be allowed to do this. And the idea here is that Rabbi Zera is basically raising this question about hearing the same argument for Rabbi Hanina. And, it looks like, it looks like Rabbi Zera is responding that this produce is assumed to have been exchanged and treated exactly like tevel. And to go and suggest otherwise, like Rabbi Hanina is doing, is without merit. So, really, this Gemara is concluding that, according to the Tanna Kamma, the produce that the depositor gives back and gets back, the person who deposited it gets back, is going to be definite tevel in every possible way without any doubt. There's a lot there. Now, the Gemara is going to talk about the view of the Tanna Kamma, who's going to presume that the idol-worshipping custodian exchanged the tithe produce that you gave to him with his own tevel produce and is now going to treat the returned produce as definite tevel. Now, the Gemara that's coming up is going to be talking about the opposite minority view by Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is going to be arguing that the produce that you get back is not definite tevel. It's really going to be Demai. And again, the clue about all of this is going to be, because you'd say, look, I gave, the idol worshiper had a box of grain, and I had a box of grain, and I brought it in. Tanna Kamma says, well, when you get it back, you have definite tevel. Shimon Bar Yochai says, no. You don't have definite tevel, you have Demai. And it's not going to be because maybe the idol worshiper didn't exchange it. This is not going to be like Rabbi Hanina's point in Avodah Zarah. Rabbi Hanina's point is saying, well, maybe he didn't exchange it. And if he didn't exchange it, well, maybe it looks like Rabbi Shimon's view that this is going to be Demai. But that actually is not Rabbi Shimon's view. Rabbi Shimon's view is also going to be that the idol worshiper is going to exchange it. But the key over here is going to be a debate on what is the status of produce that an idol worshiper grew. Is that going to be subject to tithes or not? And the Tanna Kamma is going to say that on a Doraita level and certainly a D'Rabbanan level, yes, it does. And on the opposite view by Rabbi Shimon is going to say that it's only subject to tithes on a rabbinic level, and that Doraita, it's not subject to tithes, but on a rabbinic level it is. That's how you're coming up with Demai. Now, more about Rabbi Shimon's view in the Gemara coming up. So, Rabbi Chia Bar Bun says in the name of Rabbi Yosei ben Hanina, Rabbi Shimon said that all the returned produce is Demai, only when one deposited the same amount of produce that was there in the custodian's box. But if someone deposited by the custodian 2 boxes of produce and the custodian only had 1 box of produce, then we presume that only 1 box is exchanged and only 1 box will be Demai, while the other one is going to be definitely tithed. Now, there's a lot going on here. So, Rabbi Shimon is definitely in this Baraisa taking that same position that, yes, definitely the idol worshiper made a switch here. But in the case of you bringing in 2 boxes and they have 1 box, they did make a switch, but they only switched 1. And in the case of only making 1 switch, 1 is definitely going to be tithed because he only had 1 box and you had 2. And 1 is going to be basically Demai. So what do you do in there? Or let's say you brought in, 5 boxes and the idol worshiping custodian only has 1 box. What do you do there? Well, according to this brisa, you're always going to assume that the 1 box is going to have been switched, and you're going to get back 4 boxes of definite tithed produce, and 1 box will be subject to Demai, according to Rabbi Shimon, the minority view here. So that's really a lot there. So what do you do now that you got back your multiple boxes that's tithed and 1 box that's not? Well, we know a trick from Masechet Trumos on that you could say that, this box is, that I have in front of me is definitely the tithed box, and leave the box that's Demai alone. You can eat the box that's, or make it flour and then eat it with taking it to the miller and then making it into bread and then eat it and say, okay, that was my tithed produce. And then you can come back to the second box and you could say, okay, this one is the tithed one and that one was the Demai one. And then you could go through the same process and eat both of them. We know this from the law on the forbidden fats when you have in 2 boxes. By the way, this halacha only works when the object is in 2 different locations, like in 2 different boxes. So that could be one way to solve it. But, how do you rectify the second one? Because now it becomes problematic, because you can't tithe this box on behalf of that box, because one is not definite tevel and the other one is not definite tevel. And, you really can't separate out tithes from something that's already been tithed. So, it becomes problematic on how to rectify it. And, you can't simply just separate tithes from Demai produce on behalf of other Demai produce, just like someone can separate tithes from, it becomes like very complicated. And, the way to solve it is you have to go through this, 2-box thing where you're trying to eat 1 box at a time. One could eat. One could take out required tithes on a rabbinic level, and do that on behalf of whichever one contained the Demai produce. You could do that as well, but that's not going to be definite tithes. That's going to be tithes that's going to be really like a rabbinic thing, because you don't know if you tithe the right box or not. So it gets to be very complicated. So it's very simple, by the way, with the Tanna Kamma solution. The Tanna Kamma solution is going to be very simple. You gave him a box, and you're getting back tevel. What about 2 boxes and he has 1 box? I think the Tanna Kamma, that's what's going to be, coming up on what are you going to do with that, because the Tanna Kamma is going to have a slightly different view on it, and it's actually going to end up being okay. So Rabbi Yosei ben Hanina is going to explain this in this Gemara. He's going to say that this 1 box is treated as rectified produce only when both of the boxes are in existence. And if the first box has been deposited and is eaten, then it doesn't exist, and the second box would be treated like Demai. So if you had a case where, like I said, you're eating this box, you're saying, okay, this is the definite box that's definitely tithed, and I'm going to eat this one. Then you're going to end up with a second box, and then you could, then what you could do is you could say, well, this one is the Demai, and then you could tithe it. The problem comes when you have both boxes in existence. It gets very hard to tithe on this versus that. In other words, if you have one that's definitely been tithed and one that is going to be Demai, and you possess both of them, and you have to tithe the Demai one, that gets very tricky. But really, the way to fix it is you eat the one that has already the tithes, and then you're left with the Demai box. And Rabbi Chia Bar Bun is going to continue and say an explanation of Rabbi Yosef ben Chanina, and it's going to get interesting. So the Gemara says, if 100 people who had deposited one sa'ah each by an idol-worshipping custodian takes back from him 100 sa'ah simultaneously, then each and every one of them must suspect that his box was the one that was exchanged by the custodian, and he would have to rectify it as Demai. That would be the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So let's say the custodian has one box. All of a sudden, 100 people come in at the same time, bring in a box that's exactly the same size, that has the same amount of grain, and gives it to the custodian. Well, let's say everybody comes back and comes to collect it at the same time. Well, then each one of them has to go back and tithe it, because you have to suspect that your box was the one that was switched. And the Gemara is going to continue and say, furthermore, even if they gave all 100 boxes to a single person, nevertheless, all 100 boxes have to be rectified as Demai, because they've already been established as Demai. So the Gemara is basically saying that in the case of 100 people bringing it in, and the custodian only has a single box, now everybody's coming and taking it back out, that they're all treated like suspect, because he definitely switched, and you end up where maybe the first one had the Demai, or maybe the last one had it, where I'm sorry, the switched grain, or maybe the last one had the switched grain, but now all of them get to be assumed as having the switched grain. So it ends up that you thought you were bringing in one box, and no matter what, you have to tithe it. And that's going to be interesting, because this is dealing with deposits that are done simultaneously. And this is also being done with deposits that are retrieved simultaneously. But the question is, like, you have in rabbinic law, you have a question of where you have like uncertainties of rabbinic law. We're going to assume a lenient position, and then what's interesting is that they're all getting treated like Demai, and this is going to be one of the nuances that's coming along with uncertainty with regards to rabbinic law, because Rabbi Shimon is basically putting this in as a case of rabbinic law. It's not a case of Doraita. Now, in the case of the Tanna Kamma are saying that you're getting back definite tevel, and one of these boxes is definite tevel, and then 99 boxes are not definite tevel, but one box is. In the case over here, that's a good question as to whether the one box of tevel would need to be tithed. But certainly, in the case of the rabbinic restriction, all the boxes need to be tithed. So the case is going to continue, and it's going to say that if one person deposited 100 sa'ah at different times by an idol-worshipping custodian, and he takes back from him 100 sa'ahs simultaneously, the deposit, the sa'ah that he deposited first is going to be Demai, and the rest is going to be definite rectified produce. So the idea here is going to be that you brought it. The idol worshipping custodian had one box, and you brought in 100 box. Tanna Kamma is coming along and saying the first one you take back, that's going to be the one that is going to be where you have to separate out the tithes. Rather, Rabbi Shimon would be saying that, and then the 99 boxes you're getting back are going to assume to be okay. Now, the Gemara is going to continue, and by the way, I would assume that would be the same logic where you had 100 people bringing in boxes and taking them out, you would say that the first guy who took out the box, he's the one who had the box switched, and then the 99 other people don't. But this is only a case where you know for sure that the idol worshiper only had one box of grain. If you don't know that, and you can't be sure of that, and there's no way to know that, and he had, there's no information, and you just went into the idol worshiper custodian, brought in your box, and 100 other people brought in the box, everybody's getting back a box of tevel. This case is only working where you know for sure that the idol worshiper custodian only has one box for sure. But without that information, it's just going to be like what the Mishnah says. Everybody gets back a box of tevel, definite tevel. So the next case is going to be that if he gave him 100, he gave to them 100. He gave then 100 different people, all 100 sa'ahs, and then the Gemara says that they've already been established as definite rectified produce on a biblical level. Let me explain this because this is a little bit cryptic. So in the last case, you have 100 people retrieving the single sa'ah deposit from a non-Jew simultaneously, where all the produce is treated as Demai. That, by the way, is going to be Shimon. Rabbi Shimon's going to say it's Demai. And here they're all going to be treated as rectified produce. So in the other case, in the first case, the status of each deposit must be considered at the time they retrieve their deposits. And they're retrieving this simultaneously. And you get a case where nullification is inapplicable even biblically. And so we rule that each and every one of these sa'ah is going to be Demai. This case is different. It's going to go like this with the explanation of the Marafulda. It's going to say, in this case, the status of each sa'ah is determined by when the one owner retrieved all 100 sa'ah, at which point biblical nullification gets applied, and accordingly, when the 100 sa'ah of these boxes gets transferred now to 100 different people, each and every one of the sa'ah is deemed to be rectified. So, although when one owner retrieved all the produce, we ruled that the first one is going to be Demai, and then the other ones are not. In this case, once it gets transferred to different owners, even the first one can be treated as rectified produce. So this even, by the way, would be on the Deraita level for when it's going to be Tevel. Why would this be? And the idea, says Marafulda, is because even when it was all owned by one person, nullification is applicable. And it was only by a rabbinic decree not to allow the sa'ah of Demai to be nullified. Why? Because nullification would result in exempting the depositor from his definite monetary obligation to give one Trumas Meiser portion to the Kohen. Since one of the sa'ah that is going to be in these boxes is going to be definite Demai. But in this case, where the produce is transferred to 100 people, the rabbinic decree is disregarded. Why? Because nullification is no longer going to exempt any specific person from a definite obligation. And that's why the decree is disregarded. The original nullification can be relied on, and each and every one of the sa'ah is going to be treated as rectified produce. So in these cases, now you can go back and you can unpack what would happen where this would be like, the Tanna Kamma's case. And in the Tanna Kamma's case, if the one person is coming and taking it and then distributing it to 100 different people, then it's going to count with the nullification rule, and then you're not going to have to worry about doing the ties. But if the depositor brought in 100 boxes and it's known for sure that the idol worshiper had one box, and there's no distribution going on, then the one person who takes back the first box has to tithe the first box, and the other 99, he doesn't need to tithe. But in the case where he's getting back 100 boxes and distributing it simultaneously to 100 different people, the nullification principle takes effect, even on the Doraita level, and nobody needs to tithe it. So the Gemara now is going to refine Rabbi Shimon's point, and the Gemara says that it was taught in a baraisa in the name of Rabbi Shimon in the name of Rabbi Tarfon, that the rabbis treated the returned box of this Jew who deposited from the idol worshiper as the product of this idol worshiper's custodian, which Rabbi Shimon, who's quoting this in the name of Rabbi Tarfon, is going to be saying Demai. Where did Rabbi Shimon get this from? He got it from Rabbi Tarfon. But this is all implying that the deposited produce, which is in excess, is going to be owned by the custodian. That's going to be Demai. And the Gemara is going to refine this even more. It's going to say, according to Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina, in the Baraisa, that Rabbi Shimon said only the returned product equal to the amount of produce that is in the custodian's box is Demai. So Rabbi Yosef ben Chanina is explaining Rabbi Shimon as saying that when you know that the custodian has a single box, and you have a box as well, you're getting back Demai. And if you know that they have only one box and there's 100 people simultaneously bringing in 100 boxes simultaneously, one is still getting switched, definitely. And the case is going to be, how do you handle that depending on how the pickup works? So the sub-theme here is not going to be that, maybe an exchange didn't happen. Both the Tanna Kamma and Rabbi Shimon are agreeing that, yes, an exchange happened. The idol worshiper stole the produce. And the reason it's Demai is not because there might not have been a theft. The reason is going to be coming up in part 3 of this shiur, is going to be because who is growing this land? What is the status of the land that's going to have produce grown by a non-Jew? Is that going to be subject to tithes or not? And Rabbi Shimon is going to be saying that it is Demai because they are subject to tithing only rabbinically, not biblically. And that is going to be why, according to Rabbi Shimon, it is not definite tevel. But according to the Tanna Kamma, it is going to be definite tevel. That is going to be the halacha. And one of the things that we see here is that Rabbi Shimon in the Mishnah means that only an amount equal to what the custodian owns is going to be deemed to be Demai. And definitely there's going to be a case of switching. Everybody agrees that there's switching. But Rabbi Shimon is not saying that everyone who brings it in is going to be getting back definite tevel. Rabbi Shimon is saying if the custodian only has one box, and you know that for sure, and lots of other people bring in boxes, only what the custodian actually owned is going to be a problem. That's going to be the point of Rabbi Shimon. Now, without going into depth in the halacha, it could look like everybody who brings in the produce to the idol worshiper, according to Tanna Kamma, would be getting back definite tevel. And I think that the refinement that's coming here comes when everybody has the information that there's only one box that's there. And I think even the Tanna Kamma would agree that if you knew that there's one box and you brought in 3 boxes, you would assume that one of the boxes definitely is switched and the other 2 are not. You would not assume that, I think according to the Tanna Kamma, that all 3 boxes that you got back would be switched because the idol worshiper only had one. The real question is going to be on, why is it that you're getting back Demai instead of definite tevel? In other words, you make a switch 1 for 1, And, in either case, you bring in one box, and the idol worshiper has one box, and the Tanna Kamma says you got back definite tevel. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is saying that you got back Demai. And we're going to cover that tomorrow on why exactly that is with regards to non-Jews growing produce in the land. Have a great day.